Have you ever been completely certain about what you wanted? Able to picture it, feel the pull of it, almost taste what it would be like to have it, and then looked up one day to find a year had passed and you were standing in exactly the same place? You weren't idle. You thought about it. You researched it. You made plans. And somehow, despite all of that, the distance between where you were and where you wanted to be didn't shrink at all. If that's ever been you, the samurai had a name for what was happening. And they had something far more useful than sympathy. They had a way out. Let me tell you about a warrior named Yuki. Yuki had everything that was supposed to matter. Fierce ambition, a vivid picture of the warrior he was going to become, plans detailed enough to fill a dozen scrolls. When he closed his eyes, he could place himself among the finest fighters in the land. The vision felt less like imagination and more like memory. And that was exactly where the trouble lived. The sharper Yuki's picture of his future greatness became, the less urgency he felt to train for it. His dreams had quietly become a place he could live without earning it. A world where he was already accomplished, already admired, already the warrior he intended to be. Why endure the grind of real practice when closing his eyes brought him straight to the glory? When other warriors rose before dawn to train, Yuki told himself that mental preparation was equally important. When they drilled basic movements until their muscles gave out, he studied advanced techniques in books. When they sparred and got beaten and learned from it, he watched from a safe distance, protecting himself from the humiliation of being a genuine beginner. The years moved on without him. His dreams kept expanding. His actual abilities stayed frozen. Younger students arrived at the dojo with no grand strategy, just willingness to be bad at something until they weren't. Within months, they were passing him. Not because they were gifted, because they were willing to struggle through the stage he kept avoiding. Then a morning arrived that changed everything. A young warrior who joined the dojo at 16 executed a complex sword technique with effortless precision. Yuki recognized it immediately. He'd been reading about that technique, planning to learn it, for more than 5 years. In those same 5 years, this young warrior had simply done the work. Something broke open in Yuki as he stood watching. His dreams hadn't been lifting him toward greatness. They'd been quietly replacing it. His ambition had become the wall between him and real growth. He'd spent years confusing the ease of imagining with the difficulty of doing. And that confusion had cost him time he couldn't get back. What happened to Yuki isn't unique to him. It lives in all of us. We believe that wanting something strongly enough should move us toward it. But the samurai understood something the modern mind struggles to accept. The brain rewards itself for intention, even when nothing in the world has actually changed. Every time we picture the goal, talk about our plans with passion, or build another strategy, the mind generates something that feels like real progress. We feel like we're getting closer. We're not. We're standing still. The ancient warriors recognized this trap and gave it a name. They called it the illness of 1,000 thoughts, a condition where the mind becomes so consumed with planning that it never rests in the simplicity of action. They watched it turn real potential into quiet regret, widening the gap between who someone could have been and who they actually became. The samurai built a direct answer to it. They called it Kaizen no Michi, the way of small improvements. It's one of the most powerful ancient Japanese methods for building daily habits and overcoming procrastination that disguises itself as preparation. The principle is simple. A mountain isn't climbed by staring at the peak. It's climbed one step at a time. And what makes those steps powerful isn't their size. It's that they never stop. There's an old story of a master swordsman who took on a student paralyzed by the scale of what he wanted to learn. Every time this student looked at the advanced techniques ahead of him, the enormity of the journey froze him before he could start. The master gave him one instruction: practice one movement. Just one. The very first stance you learned on your first day. Do it every morning before anything else. The student didn't understand. One movement? How could something so small lead anywhere worth going? The master didn't explain further. One movement. Every morning. No exceptions. Days became weeks. The stance became automatic. Weeks became months. Because the commitment was small enough to never feel like a burden, it never triggered the resistance that had always stopped him. Because it required no motivation, he never had to wait until he felt ready. And because he never broke the chain, something began to change in both his body and his mind. 6 months in, the student realized something astonishing. The movement he'd been practicing was the foundation beneath every advanced technique the senior students were performing. Because his foundation was now unshakable, everything that came next would be far easier than he'd ever imagined. The friends who'd laughed at his tiny daily practice were still designing their perfect routines, still waiting for the right moment, still standing exactly where they'd been 6 months ago. This is what Kaizen no Michi teaches about building consistency through small daily habits. The size of the action matters far less than whether you keep doing it. A commitment large enough to feel impressive is almost always large enough to eventually break. A commitment small enough to never break becomes a foundation capable of holding anything. There's a second teaching from the swordmaster Yagyu Munenori, one of the most respected strategic minds in samurai history. He said, "The sword that waits for perfect conditions never leaves its sheath. If you wait for the right moment, you may wait forever." Munenori trained his students to act before they felt ready. This wasn't recklessness. It was recognition that readiness is an illusion the mind creates to protect itself from the discomfort of being inexperienced. It doesn't come before you begin. It only grows from beginning. In real combat, there's no perfect moment. There's only the moment you're in. Action, even hesitant and imperfect action, creates momentum and growth that no amount of waiting ever could. This is the samurai approach to overcoming procrastination and taking consistent daily action. Readiness comes through doing, not before it. They expressed their philosophy on this in a single statement worth keeping. "I'm not controlled by my feelings. I'm guided by my commitments." They didn't ask each morning whether they felt like training. Feelings were understood as weather, constantly shifting, unreliable as guides for what matters. The commitment was what they returned to, and commitments don't care what the weather is doing. When you build your days on commitments rather than feelings, the need for motivation quietly disappears. Motivation is only needed when you're still convincing yourself. Once you've committed, the question's already answered. You do it because you said you would. Now let's return to Yuki, because his story has one more thing to teach. After that morning of clarity, he faced the choice that follows every honest reckoning. He could keep protecting himself with plans and dreams, or he could accept the humbling work of actually starting. He chose the harder path. The next morning, Yuki walked to the youngest student in the dojo and asked one question. "What's the very first movement you were taught?" The child showed him. A basic stance, the foundation every warrior learns on their first day. Yuki practiced it. Nothing else. Just that one position, held with full attention. It felt almost absurd, going back to something this elementary after years of studying advanced techniques. But something was different this time. He was finally moving. He came back to it every morning. 1 month passed, then 2. His master began adding movements, one at a time, each built on the foundation now solid beneath him. A year later, Yuki wasn't the greatest warrior in the dojo. He wasn't yet the person he'd imagined. But he was no longer someone standing still while calling it preparation. He was someone in motion. And motion, once started, tends to keep going. The change wasn't in becoming perfect. It was in finally closing the gap between imagining a life and actually living one. That's what the samurai offer to anyone who feels trapped between wanting and doing. You don't need to transform overnight. One action, small enough that resistance can't grip it, is what you need, and the commitment to repeat it regardless of how you feel. One movement, one sentence, one step. Tomorrow morning, before you reach for your phone, do that one thing. Then do it the morning after. Build consistency first. Everything worth having rises from that foundation. The gap between who you are and who you could become won't close through better planning. It won't close through waiting for ideal conditions. It'll close through small actions, repeated so faithfully they stop being what you do and become who you are. The samurai knew this. Strength isn't found in waiting for the perfect moment. It's built by treating whatever moment you're in as the one where you begin. The sword that waits for perfect conditions never leaves its sheath, but the warrior who moves, even imperfectly, eventually masters the blade. Your one small action is waiting. Not tomorrow's version, today's. Choose it now. Commit fully, and let that commitment carry you on the mornings when everything inside you says, wait. Come to the comments and tell me what your one action is. Not to perform commitment, to make it real. The samurai knew that a decision spoken in the presence of witnesses is where real change begins. I'll see you in the next one, where we keep walking the warrior's path together. Until then, keep moving forward.